Time on Kustom Works, we're going to be doing a bit on the A40 and we'll be taking a look at some brand new wheels and the underside of the non-standard. Let's get to the workshop. First up, let's have a look at how we mounted the seat belts in the A40. Right, and so what we're doing is these seat belts, and to mount the seat belts in there is some metal in the floor. If you remember, we put a lot of bracing in, so we've got good mounting points, and we just need to make some brackets to sit between the seats so that the seat belts come up nicely and fit. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to drill these, 2 to go through the floor, 1 for the seat belt, and we'll ram these up and clean them off, but first let's get them all drilled. So there's our plate. I've rounded up these edges just because this bit will stick out in the car. This bottom piece won't. I did round up these edges as well, but that was, I don't know, wrong. Got it wrong. But this will be under the carpet. This will be the bit that sticks out that everything bolts to. So now all we've got to do is we'll clean these up, give them a quick coat of paint, then we'll bolt them in the car. Okay, so fitting seat belts into a hot rod sort of car like that. Have you seen in previous episodes, I've had to put a lot of steel under the floor because there was just nowhere to bolt anything to. I've had to add cross members to the back of the cab so the steel up the sides and pull in with the top mount of the seat belt. Just a lot of work before I actually get to this point. And when you're bolting seat belts into a floor, so first off, for the floor mounts, I've made this piece of angle, and that will sit in between the 2 seats and this bit of seat belt. What's it called? The stalk, the latch, something like that. The seat belt latch mounts onto there, and then this screws through the floor. You know, with this car, we're working on a chassis car with not much steel under the floor. So you've always got to find a good bit of steel. If you're working on a steel car, always remember that if you bolt through single skin steel, you need a plate on the back. Now for these, it is going through steel, but it's not very thick. It is a little bit thicker than normal floor, but not very thick, and they're brackets on the chassis. So I'll be going with this on the top, I'll be going with that underneath, and then clamping, sandwiching the floor between those two. And then there's just no chance that that's ever going to tear through the floor. But if you just have a knot on a bolt, it will tear through the floor. And take it from me, the MOT man will not pass it unless it's got a plate on the back if you've fitted your own seatbelt mounts. Goes without saying, everything's got to be nylock nuts, things bolt together. Spring washers, yeah, I'll go spring washer and nylock nut. Why not? Let's make sure it's you know, all really strong, your life depends on it. And then it's sort of a roll cage in the car, box section up both sides, and to bolt to that box section, what I've done, I've made this piece of plate that it's got the nut on the back, so I can screw that in. And what I'll do, I'll seam weld this into the wall of the box, cut a hole out so that captive nut can sit in, and then that holds the top seat belt. Also, old car, hot rod, anything like that, just always remember, you ain't got no airbag, no ABS, nothing else. All you've got is that seat belt and probably 6 bolts holding you in. So, don't scrimp, get it right. Okay then, so we've got these pieces of angle in there, and like I say, that is bolted to the outrigger that's welded to the chassis. These are welded to 2 plates that are underneath and welded to the chassis, and then they're plated on the back and with these large washers. So everything there is not going to move. One thing we have got, and the amount of work to make this bolt fit in this hole is just unbelievable. But as I shown you before, I've welded the nut on the back of a plate, and what I'm going to do is weld them into this box section that we put on earlier. This box section links to what the piece of box section this is on, that's welded to the chassis. And then that goes up, this piece of tube braces those two apart, again welded to the chassis and braced by this, and these are all triangulated by these two 3x4 diagonals in the back that weld back to the chassis as well. Now, seems like a lot of work, but to put that top mounting on a fiberglass car, really that's what you've got to have. As you know, if you're in an accident, the amount of weight, the inertia sort of creates as you move forward, puts a massive strain on all these things. So yeah, all of that steel just for that one bolt. That's the way it's got to be. Okay then, so all the alley is now on the bed. Even this fiddly bit up here, there's a bit of a gap there, but of course that'll have a bead of sealant down it, so there's no cracking or anything in the future. With 120 grit, I've DA'd it all off, just to give it this nice dull aluminium look. And now, what I'm going to do, sort of the last piece of it, is on this underside here, this has been covered in resin, but there's this sort of raw edge of plywood. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mass around here, I'm going to go around there with PU sealant, just to make sure that there's glue right up in this crack and everything's bonded, everything's solid, everything's waterproof. Let's get to it. Let's make this a bit more waterproof than it already is. Right, and so I've done all of this, gone round it, put the sealant on, so between the metal and the wood there's no gap no more. Sealant we masked, so we minimised how much we got on here. There is a little bit, but that'll signed off when we do the final preparation before the matte clear goes on it. And of course I'll be painting all of this black in here, all in the back of this bed black, and also another thing, I'll be boxing off this fuel filler that comes down here. Because this car was a kit car before, the fuel filler was in a very awkward place, and we had to sort of make this pipe so it can be filled from the back rather than it be filled very low down on the side. But yeah, we'll be boxing that in, putting timber on the floor in here, and just tidying the whole thing up. Right, so I'm fitting these rear fenders. Now, what I've done, I've made these steel brackets, the metal bolted to the fiberglass rear fender, and then, if you remember, these sides of these beds are like a piece of waterproof ply, but then they're clad in dye bond. Now, to fix this, I need to bolt through that to bolt it on. Now, at this end here, I've bolted that on, and that's all fine, so I can get to the back. But on this end, I've got about a 10mm gap in which I've got to get a nut, and I will just show you. Okay, if you can see there, that is the bolt going in and out, and there is absolutely no way of me even touch it. Oh, I can touch it a little bit. No way of me getting a bolt on it, but this is what I've done. So using one of my favourite things, obviously it's going to have something to do with dye bond and super glue, isn't it? So strip of dye bond, and then I have super glued the washer to the nut and the nut to this, and what I'm going to do is pop that up behind, and then in goes the bolt. Let's do it. Okay then, so here's the nut super glued on. There's the bolt. Now what I'm going to do, that up there, that goes on there, and that's it. I'll just whip that up with the bolt gun, and the fender is securely attached. This has been another one of my medium-sized tips. Probably not life-changing, but I don't know, someone might do it again one day. Brilliant. Now, let's go outside and take a look at the ensign. Right, so we are underneath the ensign. Now, why am I underneath the ensign? Because I just want to make it look a bit nicer underneath. I've done a few jobs. I've changed the oil in the diff. I did an oil change on the car, and I thought, you know, it's a bit dirty under here. I'm just going to make it look a little bit nicer, and just so that the car lasts longer. So what I'm going to do, I've degreased everything. I've just put degreaser, just normal degreaser, in my spray gun, sprayed all underneath, left it for a bit, and then jet washed everything. Now this isn't a particularly dirty car underneath, you know, we make it look a bit better. So we've got a lot of sort of just rusty metal now, all the dirt's off of it. And the main thing I've done is I have picked out some parts that could actually be painted and painted them. So the diff cover, whilst that was off, I painted it. Also, I'm going to paint the whole exhaust in high temperature steel paint. And another thing, just off the jet wash that came up particularly nice, was the oil pan for the gearbox. So I'm going to paint that silver as well. And when I come to black it, what I'll do, mask these bits off, black the hole underneath, undo those. Like it's got some new bits, and it'll all just look nice and clean and tidy underneath. Always fun for the MOT man. So then, what I did yesterday, I painted all these bits. I went over the exhaust with some nice silver paint, painted the diff cover, did the oil pan on the gearbox, and what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to mask those bits up before I black the whole underside of the car. And when we take that off, it'll look really nice because it's not just all black. Okay then, so under the ensign, all painted and it's all dry now. If you notice, there's bits like the diff cover just here. And what I did with that, I painted that silver just so it, you know, just stands out. If anyone looks underneath, looks nice. Painted all the exhaust silver in heat-proof paint. Everything's just all nice and painted. Everything's nice and clean. I also picked out the starter motor because I just didn't think that should be covered in this thick paint. I jet washed it back, got all the loose off, and then I've covered it with this, and it really does seem to have sealed it nicely, but also it looks great. So the wheels originally, I painted them like gold with a little bit of flaking. I was going for that sort of 60s custom look. And then I found a really nice set of chrome hubcaps off a 60s Citroen. I put those on, but I don't know, I've always thought it looked, they were nice, but I thought it made it look a little bit too, you know, like restored rather than custom. And a lot of the modifications on this car are so subtle, you might not realise how much it's been modified and just think it's just an old car. So, because I love that 60s custom look, I thought I'll go for some chrome steelies. So this is what I've done. So then, I got my old wheels, took those hubcaps off, they'll be going on another project. So I took them to a local place that said they did chrome powder coating. And here it is. Here's one of the wheels with the tyre back on in its chrome powder coat. Now I've got to say, it might not be exactly chrome, but it's pretty darn good. And what I'm going to do, just to jazz these up and make them look a little bit more like 60s wheels, first off, I bought these trim rings. And these were pretty cheap off of eBay, made of plastic, which I'm thinking is good. Because unless they're like stainless steel, you know, all cheap chrome stuff always goes rusty. So, lasts forever, plastic trim ring. So, I'll drop that on now. So that definitely, you know, dresses up that edge, and any dullness in the powder coated chrome is sort of is hidden on the rim with that. But then wheels need a little bit more, you know, sort of lowrider kind of feel. So I got these from Northants Tyres, which are Jag Chevy stud pattern, which these wheels are spider caps, I think they're called, for in the middle of the wheel. So once we add those, obviously these go on a back mounting plate. Once we add those, that is it. And I'm thinking that definitely looks a lot more like a custom wheel. Okay, and so just a little bit about wheels. I know you might already know this, you might not. You might be thinking, shut up and do something more entertaining. But anyway, a little bit of history. Chrome reverse wheels. Why do we have chrome reverse wheels? The reason is, back in the day, in the 50s, there were no aftermarket wheels. So there was no slot mags, daisy mags, centre lines, other types of wheel, Astro Supremes. There was none of those. None of those wheels even existed. And what a lot of the custom shops did, so they had custom wheels, they'd flip the wheel round so it had a deeper rim, they'd weld it back in, and they just send that for chroming. People liked them on the cars they did, and then all of those shops back in the 50s started selling steel chrome wheels, and that developed that a few more designs came out, and that gives us today's aftermarket wheel market. There we go. History of customizing lesson over. Right, and so, you know, sometimes you got a car like the non-standard, and this is on 2-inch lowering blocks, so it sits pretty low at the back, and then it's got this sort of lowered wheel arch, and yes, there is no way of getting the wheels on this car. Like, they just don't fit through the gap. So just my, what is it, like is this a tip? I think it is. I've got scissor jack, welded a bolt on it. The bolt's the same size as the wheel nuts. And I know this is on the ramp, so it seems really simple, but, you know, I used to do this. You just jack the car up, get it on some axle stands, and then if you get the scissor jack between the axle and the chassis rail, just wind that up, brings the axle down, and then the wheel fits straight on. This has been a dubious, not a top tip, like a mid-range tip, I think. Yeah, that's what it's been. Yeah. Now, I did hope that I'll be putting these wheels on the car, maybe even going for a drive this episode. But because I had them powder coated, we had to take all the valves out. Now, this being a standard enzyme, which I've realised recently, after paying £130 for 2 track rod ends. It's an incredibly rare car, and the wheels have got a different size of, you know, like valve stem to them. So I'm just waiting for the place to get some larger valve stems. So get the valve stems in, get the wheels on, put it all together, get it on the car. But that will be, hopefully, it will be next time. Okay, so that's it for this week. Join us next week when we're going to be looking at the exhaust and the rear suspension on the A40 and getting that project a little bit closer to being MOT'd and on the road. Until then, please give us a thumbs up, click the subscribe button and click the bell icon for regular updates. Okay then, so until next time, thank you very much and good night!